Control them? No, I just gird them in armor and let them loose. Gotcha, Otepec Huntmaster. How's it going, everyone? I'm Josh from Elder Drunken Highlander, and today I'm coming to you with a deck that's got some dang big teeth. This deck is a Vampire Dinosaur Tribal deck, yeah that's right, that abuses a lot of extremely niche interactions between two specific creature types. This deck is helmed by a friend of the channel, Olivia Voldaren, who has the ability to both trigger Enrage and turn our dinos into vicious vamps. Before we get into the deck though, I want to take literally 30 seconds to shamelessly plug our YouTube channel. We are fast approaching the 500 subscriber mark, which is a really big goal for us. When we get there, we plan to open up our Patreon and start doing more events with our viewers on our Discord server. So if those are things that you're interested in, or if you just like our content and want to show that you support us, consider subscribing. YouTube statistics is telling me that most of you aren't. Thanks! This deck was born from two problems. Problem 1 was that I wanted something that could trigger Enrage in the command zone. Problem 2 was that I wanted to play a dino deck that uses lords, and dinosaurs don't really have a ton of options for lords and other tribal support. Vampires, on the other hand, have a myriad of options for lords and provide ample ways to not only trigger Enrage, but also convert other creatures to their tribe. Plus, both dinos and vampires have big teeth, and they're from Ixalan. It was clear what I needed to do. Our Vampire Dino Tribal deck has the goal of building what is basically a dinosaur-shaped gun on our board state in a pseudo-Voltron manner. If we are doing well, we have a beefed-up Olivia Voldaren guarding our board, a vampire support card to buff our team, an Enrage creature with which we can munch and punch. Oh, and it also helps to have some other beefy dinos to attack with. We could talk more about those guys later. Look to keep opening hands with 2 to 3 lands, 1 to 2 ramp pieces, and at least 1 dinosaur. If you don't have a dino or a way to get a dino, you should strongly consider a mulligan. This is a dinosaur deck after all. Once we have our mana established, try and get Olivia down on the board and begin biting dinosaurs and applying life total pressure. I often find it's best to leave Miss Voldaren on blocking duty so as to discourage even flying creatures from swinging in for chip-ins. The goal of this deck, as stated earlier, is to basically build a dinosaur gun. We want an Enraged dino, Olivia or another way to repeatedly ping our dude, and a buttload of open mana. From there we can just pay into pings and Enrage until everyone is dead. We can increase the effectiveness of our Enrage as well with effects that synergize with our Enragers dealing damage, such as lifelink effects, death touch effects, and other things such as Mephedros Vampire. By comboing something like our Sun Crown Hunters with Pyrohemia and a lifelink effect, we can start really bringing the pain to the table. We can also utilize our Vampire Lords to buff up vampires and dinosaurs alike, usually with +1/+1 counters. Cards like Cordial Vampire have lots of synergies with the various vampiric dinos in the deck. There are many dinosaurs who synergize with the various effects that our vampire helpers give us. Stuff like Stormkirk Captain kickstarting Momentum Rumbler, Olivia Mobilized for War popping off in tandem with the Surly Badgesaur, or Soren Imperious Bloodlord empowering a Needletooth Raptor or charging Tuskodon with Death Touch and Lifelink is the type of niche synergy this deck is built around. Speaking of niche synergies, we have a few other secondary packages, so to speak, of groups of cards that work together within this deck. Our most prominent one is our Proliferate package that helps synergize with our +1/+1 counter sub-theme along with our Planeswalkers. Another one is our Lifelink package, which helps us pop off with our damage-dealing creatures and can also help keep us in the game and balance the cards that use our life total as a resource. Lastly, we have a tiny reanimation package so we can get all archaeological up in here and excavate some undead dinos to bite necks once more. We also have a Dino-tastic combo that is capable of flooding the board with 3/3 Dino tokens and creating an infinitely big Dino friend. You know what that means. It's time to get combo looted and break down this Dino-spewing, blood-sucking, game-ending crackshot of a combination right here in the middle of this deck tech. Just a note, this one is a doozy, and I've never actually assembled it. It's just easier to go for non-infinite wins in my tutorless version of this build. You can build towards this with more consistency if you want a harder win con than, maybe I'll just hit him with dinos that are also vampires, which for me is good enough. Start with Forerunner of the Empire, Mephedros Vampire with Indestructible, and Raptor Hatchling also with Indestructible. Have a dinosaur enter the battlefield somehow, Forerunner will trigger and deal 1 damage to each creature. Mephedros Vampire will trigger and put a +1/+1 counter on him for each damage dealt. This will be at least 3 counters each loop because our Forerunner counts itself along with our other 2 creatures. Our Raptor Hatchling triggers and creates a 3/3 Dino token. This token triggers Forerunner and we do the whole rodeo all over again. Since the damage from the Forerunner will kill our dinosaur tokens too, we just end the combo with 2 extra Dino tokens and an infinitely big Forerunner. We can now swing out and kill 1 person. Preferably Austin as revenge for him making that target deck that we showcased in our last major video. That was really mean. If we have a second Enrage creature with Indestructible, we can trigger them too and win the game with infinite Suncrown Hunter triggers or what have you. We can also give the Forerunner lifelink and acquire an arbitrarily large amount of life for ourselves. A Sack Outlet or ETB trigger for the tokens would seal it too. Oh, and Rampaging Ferocidon can end the game with this out as well for us. Hey, at least it dies when we begin our loop. As for weaknesses, this deck is very similar to a Voltron deck in that its game plan is heavily dependent on keeping 1 or 2 key creatures on the board at all times. As such, we will lose to decks with access to easy repeatable removal, as we can't really win from nowhere. We need a board state. If up against a removal heavy deck, cards like Bolt Bend and Deflecting Swat, which has a gnarly Dino on its art, can help save our stuff. If this becomes a problem in your meta, you can swap in more interactions such as Tibalt's Trickery, Imp's Mischief, and Recursion like Kaya's Ghost Form and Palace Siege. Notable inclusions. These are cards or groups of cards that we think are important to showcase for this build. Magmasaur. This board wipe Dino can be used to wipe the board of smaller things, trigger Enrage when it's on lower numbers, and can be grown and or kept alive with our various +1/+1 counter synergies and or proliferate effects. Our Indestructible package. These cards protect our commander from dangerous removal spells and can save our Enragers for repeated damage and spicy blocking opportunities. Labyrinth Raptor. This guy is actually the reason I built this deck, so shoutouts to him. He combos with Angrath in here for a big menacing team. Itali Primal Storm. This is a Dino that can just win the game on its own if left unchecked, or given Indestructible, or protected with all our various redirection spells. Silver-clad Ferocidons. Labyrinth Raptor was the reason I started this deck. But the Ferocidons? Oh, they're the reason I finished it. Untapping with them and Olivia or another damage effect on board is basically a game over. It's just 2 mana to make anyone sacrifice a permanent. I can just play that from the command zone. This is the reason I didn't want this deck to be very tutor heavy, because I just don't see a world where I just build efficient mana ramp, tutor for the Ferocidons, slam that down, and then I'm playing dinosaur stacks. In like a more high powered meta, that could be something that's kind of fun actually, but I really wanted to play this deck in more like a casual, dynamic, lower power games, and I don't think that kind of strategy would work for it. Nonetheless, they're in here, and if I draw them, oh, it's on. Notable exclusions. These are cards I considered for the deck but ultimately left out. You should consider them for your own version of this build. More Menace support. I would also have to add more tutors for Labyrinth Raptor, and I wanted this deck not to be tutor reliant. Captivating Vampire. I don't want this to be a theft deck. If I could, I would honestly remove Olivia's second ability. Maskwood Nexus and Friends. Why waste deck slots on that when I can do it from the command zone or with our lords like Olivia Mobilized for War and Mephedroth's Vampire. Blood Tribute. I flirted with this card quite a bit. I still don't know, it's just so fun. Kaya's Ghost Form, Shield of Kaldra, Ring of Zathrid, and other protection effects. I just ran out of slots, to be honest. If you find your stuff gets hated out, you should toss these back in. Power level. This is a casual to toon casual level build. It can present wins through Enrage damage triggers, swarming tokens, beatdown, and even commander damage, but all of its paths to victory are projected and give your opponents time to react and play around them. This deck is great for play EDH low, which is where I've been playing it and having a blast, or some relaxing games with your friends. One last thing, this deck has a name that explains what the deck does, but not one that really represents what it is. I've considered a few names for it, but ultimately haven't settled on any. If you have an idea for the name of this deck, or if you have any suggestions at all for it really, leave them in the comments for this video. I'll pick some of the ones I like and make a poll on our subreddit next week for people to vote on. You should also check out our Discord where we sometimes play spell table games, our Twitter, where I post things that can be considered by some to be mildly interesting, our Instagram where we share card alters that we've created, and our subreddit where we post extra content like polls and dank memes. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.